Welcome to the fourth part of the world's first six-part Bookinar series, hosted by Etmanski. Al's latest book, Impact: 6 Patterns to Spread Your Social Innovation, explores in depth each of the 6 mutually reinforcing patterns which are being used by successful change makers. Each 1-hour session in this series, Al will focus on one of the 6 patterns identified in his book and interview the person who revealed the pattern to him, both through their convictions and their work. Today's Bookinar is entitled Mobilizing Your Economic Power, and Al has invited his special guest, Bill Kelly, founder and first president of Stewards of Affordable Housing for the Future, and he's also director of Ashoka. I will now turn it over to Al to begin his conversation with Bill about mobilizing your economic power.
Thank you, Christy, and hello, everybody. Welcome to Pattern 4, Mobilizing Your Economic Power. Welcome whether you're listening live or whether you are listening to this as a podcast. Father Moses Cody, the radical priest and founder of the very influential Antigonish movement, which set the heather on fire in Eastern Canada during the 1930s by giving birth to a cooperative economy, once wrote, "In a democracy, people don't sit in the social and economic bleachers. They all play the game." If you are like me, you've been playing the social justice and equality game rigorously and vigorously for decades, but remain in the bleachers when it comes to economic justice and equality. I've had a hate-love relationship with money most of my life, reluctant to roll in what I perceive to be the gutter with it, but willing to do anything to get money for my social projects. Anything, that is, but earn it. Earning meant learning a little or a lot about business methods and being accountable for my performance in a much different way than when I have to account for a grant. Even though I became an Ashoka Fellow for my social enterprise work when I was with Plan, I still saw social enterprise as more or less a fundraising strategy. Not much different than direct mail solicitation or applying for a grant or putting on a fundraising event. That all changed shortly after Vicki and I met today's guest, Bill Kelly. Bill is a founding board member of Ashoka, the world's leader in social enterprise. He's a longtime friend and supporter of Bill Drayton, Ashoka's founder, and I think he embodies the best of Ashoka, as you will shortly hear. He's supportive, courteous, and generous. There's another side to Ashoka and to Bill as well. Ashoka works hard to purge any vestige of hubris from its operation. And if they think you can take it, purging hubris from their fellows as well. There are fellows like me who might be getting too full of themselves. That's the exacting and challenging side of Ashoka. And I can still remember Bill's question: what would Plan do with $1 million? My answers were all from the economic bleacher, as I thought of a number of short-term projects that could be funding. "I don't mean a grant," Bill interrupted. "I'm talking about leveraging Plan's assets to attract business partners and to further your mission." I had no idea what Bill was talking about. And thus the learning began. Learning that was sometimes painful, but opened up a brand new world for me. A new way of achieving our social objectives, goals, and aspirations by combining our social and economic power. Bill, welcome, and thanks for your gentle pushiness. I have a number of questions for you, which will reveal the full extent of your work, particularly with Stewards for Affordable Housing. But let me start with this question. What does mobilizing your economic power mean to you?
Great. Thanks, Al, for including me in this. This is a subject that's, as you know, near and dear to my heart, and something that, from a personal standpoint, has brought together some of the work that I did in the private sector as a practicing lawyer with the work I've been doing over the years on social issues. So it's from a personal standpoint, it represents the mobilization of economic power, an opportunity to try to devise approaches, solutions, and strategies that really meet both opportunities and needs. Very briefly, I think as we think about this, we really are talking about kind of a subset of looking to your assets, which I think has been a learning from Ashoka over the decades, that the most effective change agents are people that really pay very close attention to their assets and try to figure out how best to use those assets in achieving their social goals. So this is a sort of a key subset of that point of view. And I think, as I think about it, I try to distinguish, very broadly between economic power as a producer and economic power as a consumer. Your book, your chapter, I think, makes great use of the example of Ron Layton working with the Ethiopian coffee producers to capture the economic value of what they produce, rather than have it be sold in the global market as a kind of a commodity. It's now being sold as a premium product, and a good part of that premium is going to the people that actually produce the coffee. The other big perspective is the consumer perspective, and there one example I think of is a drip irrigation project that Ashoka worked on in Central and South America, where coffee farmers and others who were trying to produce fair trade products and do it effectively and cost effectively and sell their products in the market were unable to afford the drip irrigation products that were in the market generally, and were able to use their working with a set of Ashoka fellows, use their prospective purchasing power to persuade the manufacturers to modify the products to a different performance and price point that they could afford, and enabled them to achieve their goals. So, and of course, I should point out that often farmers being a good example, producers are also consumers. So those categories are not sharp ones. And then I guess the other thing I would say is that mobilizing your economic power means the opportunity to partner from strength, whether it's in the business context that I was just talking about, where the partner is a business, or in the context of political and policy change, where if you're active in the market and can show that you have met people's needs and given them opportunities, then you're much more credible as you seek to change policies to make that easier and more effective. So sorry for the long answer, but those are a couple of top of mind thoughts.
Yeah, not a long answer at all, Bill, and very, very helpful. A good reminder, for me about the reality that this blend, this marriage, this harmony of economic, social furthers our goals of justice and equity for all, whether in the social sphere, or the environmental sphere, or the financial sphere. I want to take you back, and this is probably so old to you that you may have trouble remembering it, because I think you lived and breathed this for so long, but it doesn't seem that long ago for me, or for that time when you took us to lunch and then gently gave us a push, an essential push, a fundamental push, which was, I think, a mindset push, into beginning to think about the assets that we had, at plan. Heavens, in our work at at Planned Lifetime Advocacy Network, we always saw that we were working with many of the poorest, people in our society. How could they have assets? And yet, what you did was open the door and invited Vicky and I to walk through into a world where I believe, you believe, and Ashoka believes that we all have assets. And the trick is to, first of all, recognize them before you can mobilize them. So what makes you think we have economic power and assets to mobilize?
Well, I think that to pass this back to you for a second. I mean, I think that Plan's experience is extraordinary in this respect, and that it can be replicated, across many sectors and in many different geographies. There are a lot of wonderful examples of people mobilizing power from, for example, there's an Ashoka fellow in India who has recognized that street vendors are extremely vulnerable to relatively frequent disasters in Gujarat, and that really they could form their own insurance company, pay very small, affordable premiums, and then be in a position to get back into business promptly after a big storm, or after a flood, or after, for that matter, after an urban riot, and that this has made a huge difference in their economics, but it also has made a big difference in their sense of themselves. So being a full, as Ashoka would say, a full economic citizen is really a mindset change on the part of the people who most social entrepreneurs are trying to help, and then there is a corresponding mind shift change at the level of the people that are doing the organizing and planning. So I think there's a long history of really understanding that mindset is as critical as finances, and but that a mindset that doesn't take into account the economic power of the beneficiary community is leaving its strongest card on the table.
Yeah, I certainly, I've learned that. We've learned that, in our work at Plan, but also in a more general way in the social innovation world, have spent a lot of time reminding people or revealing to people the assets they have at their disposal. It's almost like the part of the mindset is one of abundance. It's kind of a shift. It's easy to say a shift from a scarcity mentality to one of abundance, where you're using all of your considerable assets. And I like your, but what a nice reminder to me that one of the byproducts of this for us was that one of our founding board members, Joan Lawrence, I can still remember, I mean, she said, for decades I have been a fighter, and she was a ferocious advocate for not only her son, but for other people with disabilities. And she said, I always felt like I was on my knee, on my knees with my hand out. And this economic mobilization that became part of our DNA at Plan, she said, enabled her to stand up and to face everyone eye to eye. And she said it just filled her with so much strength and confidence and pride. And so that's a byproduct, I think, of this. Have you seen that, with others as well? You mentioned it, so it must be there.
Yes, no, it's there, almost almost everywhere. I mean, and it's kind of without the and pride of the people for whom a program or an approach is put together. I actually think that it's often it's unlikely to succeed. That engaging the energy, intelligence and resources of the community is really the name of the big game. So if you're whether you're the running a social service organization, or you're the ultimate beneficiary of the services or programs, if you don't feel entitled to be at the table, and if you're not bringing some power to the discussion, then you're always a beggar, and that's just not where you want to be in terms of either your own quality of life and satisfaction with what you do, or maybe more importantly, the likelihood that you're going to make a big difference.
One of the things that helped us stay on track, because we had to admit that we knew very little about how money worked, and so flying back from that lunch with you, Vicki and I said, well, why don't we just form a committee? And so we jokingly said, yeah, we'll call it our "If I Had $1 Million" committee, because that was
right. Yeah.
And you know what? It worked. We formed it, and we invited in people who knew how money worked, and learned, and are still learning from that. So in some ways, that became the custodian of the mindset, because it's so easy to slip back into a scarcity mentality, and to think that the only source of revenue for you is from elsewhere, rather than seeing it among yourselves.
Right. One of the interesting things I thought in your chapter was your reference to government support as being one element of your economic power, and I've had a lot of experience with both giving and receiving government grants, and I've come to think that there's a difference between, both in terms of the psychology and in terms of the ability to work with it, between programs that provide kind of ongoing committed support on the one hand, and those that are a grant today and a grant 4 years from now, but not reliable, and not something you can plan on or finance around. And I'm just curious. So I have a couple of examples of that. One is the school meals program in the U.S., and I imagine there's a Canadian counterpart where the national government provides for the cost of meals to be provided to children under a certain income level, and there's a group called Revolution Foods based in Berkeley that took that as a challenge, saw that as a revenue stream on behalf of low-income children, and created a company to provide high-quality nutritional meals at the price that the government was paying or subsidizing through school systems to buy really lousy meals and fast food meals and a lot of other things that were contributing to the obesity problem, and they really took that income stream as a predictable revenue base, and working with the schools and the children have built a business that I believe provides. And the last number I saw was $1 million, but I'd be shocked if they hadn't doubled that by now. Meals a day to low-income kids. So I think that's a long-winded example, but I'm curious from your experience, what the importance of that of any kind of similar stream has been in plans work or otherwise.
Well, I think you're reframing the relationship that we have with government, if I just start there, or with funders in general, but particularly with government, and again, it's this leverage question. I might step back a little bit and say that our working definition of social enterprise was always, that you shouldn't engage in social entrepreneurial activity if it didn't fulfill your mission. So it had to be on point. I'm not a big fan of, creating a business that's somehow disjointed from the actual work that you're intending to do, although many do that, and that's fine. But I'm a bit lazy, and so if it can fulfill my mission or our mission, then that's a benefit. So that's one element or component of the social entrepreneur mission. The other is to bring some added benefit or improved quality to your constituency, to your membership, to your client base, so-called, and you've just demonstrated that with your example. And then thirdly, if you will, is to bring value to your partners. And it's been our experience, at Plan, that we have a far different relationship with all levels of government because we can approach them as an equal with that pride that you were talking about before, and they're open to leveraging assets and beginning to rethink how they operate. And so we've had far more influence as advocates and lobbyists by consolidating our economic power than we ever did when we were simply pursuing strategies that were biting the ankle of government. So that is been true to our experience. And only fourthly, as another element or component of being a social entrepreneur, is the earning revenue. So they're all part of the mix.
Yeah. And as I say, I think that let me go back to my narrower point, which I think is really that I think predictable government revenue streams are really a proxy for, or a form of market demand, probably a better way to put it. And I really have become enamored of that form of policy and have pushed to develop policy proposals and programs that rely on that, as opposed to relying on discretionary governmental grants over time that are, I think, more subject to funding fluctuation and more subject to the sort of phenomenon that one can run into with foundations of the flavor of the year or the flavor of the decade. And so I'm in any event, I think I've said enough about that. But I thought it was a great insight from the chapter.
Well, let me pursue that in the context of your work with Stewards for Affordable Housing bill. You won the Purpose Prize for co-founding this remarkable consortium of social housing providers. I'm not sure how many units your collective owns together now, but when last I looked, it was well over 100,000 units across America. Can you take us back to the beginning? What was your original purpose and intention, and then perhaps we can explore some of the programmatic elements of this broader coalition or consortium?
Okay, great. Well, the organization was put together. We put it together in 2003. I did it with the leaders of a couple of housing nonprofits, and we have 11 operating members that have about 115,000 apartments for low-income people in 49 states. And so part of the recognition that led to it was that really we were not that these nonprofits, despite being sophisticated operators and providing important shelter and services for low-income people, were not having much of a policy impact, and also were not in general recognized as an important force in the market, and therefore were not getting the benefit of their performance and expertise as they developed properties and ran them and financed them and so on. So the idea was to bring together a peer group of these now 11, I think originally 7 or so members, and have them work with them to both develop strategies and to formulate policy, and to simply be a forum in which they could trade ideas and experiences with the people that were facing similar needs and opportunities. So we started slowly. In any group of people or institutions, there are the more innovative and the less innovative, and we thought it was important to get started by creating sort of mini coalitions of the willing. So we, for example, in 2007 or 8, began to focus on the energy consumption of our low-income housing, and develop some initial grant funding to get us started, and really work with 4 or 5 of them. Like 3 years later, I'm proud to say all 11 of them committed to a 20% reduction in energy and water consumption by 2020, and we have now created an idea which Congress, of all things, the American Congress, passed legislation that will enable us to do a so-called pay for success demonstration, where we will invest in the properties and be repaid out of the government savings over the next decade or so. So the big challenges early on were creating a sense of trust among all the members, and helping them to see what the possibilities were of working together, both on policy and on more operational things. We are now in the early middle, I suppose, of a long-term effort to figure out how to more effectively have the housing our members provide be a platform for people to improve their lives beyond having shelter. And as you can imagine, that's crosses every social impact and social service field, and again, we're starting slowly, working towards the long term, trying to build consensus, working with some leadership among the members, and gradually pulling this together. So it's it's a long-term effort. It is it's focused on what we think are the key issues in people's lives. It's focused on enabling them to improve their lives. It's focused on using our economic and policy power to move the effort along.
Bill, I want to come back to a piece of what you just said in terms of this question of working together. But before I do that, may I remind our listeners that if you have a question, please write it in, and we'll incorporate that into our conversation. Bill, you've slightly glossed over it, but I can imagine that there were a number of challenges of bringing a diverse group of stakeholders from across America, together. So you're sitting there and you snatched this idea from the atmosphere that you will have greater power. You'll be able to improve not only, as you described, the living conditions, but create or negotiate more favorable financial terms and the like. And then you reach out to, I think you used the word, a coalition of the willing. But you must surely have, within your constituency now, with over 115,000 units of housing stock, people who are not always, willing to follow the collective direction. How do you set the table for everyone, and how do you deal with conflict? How have you earned trust?
Well, I think a key part of it is not surprisingly listening, trying to understand what the obstacles and daily practices are inside the organization. So it's not, for example, that anybody among the members would have said it's not. They would all have agreed. They all did agree that saving CO2 emissions was a really important thing for us to be doing, even though we were a housing organization and not an environmental organization. But people have most people have full-time jobs within these organizations. They have ways of doing business that were developed internally, really without a lot of reference to their peers. They have capital needs for the properties that they own and operate, and so I guess the biggest challenge may have been moving from business as usual individually towards business as a group, business understood to include both policy and finance and operations. It's been my experience that finding within that community the people that not only generally would support the goal, but had actually begun doing some of their own thinking, or had an aha moment of their own, that this was something that they should and needed to address, has enabled us many times, I think, to start with 3 or 4 out of the 11 and broaden it through through peer exchanges to the rest of the group, and occasionally sweeten it with outside opportunities that require. For example, we persuaded HUD to change a bunch of policies, but only for people that agreed to this 20% reduction by 2020 across their portfolios. And so we were throughout the process and continue in the areas we're working in to try to find opportunities that enhance operations, enhance economics for the members as they step into taking on a more ambitious role in the environmental area or in the sort of housing as a platform initiative. So I'm not sure that answers your question completely, but that's it's believing in the people, it's developing the trust, it's making sure that the initiatives fit their institutional goals, and it's working with them at the staff level as well as the CEO and board level. So it's we have established peer groups in each of about 10 different topics, for example, energy and water, among the members, so that the interaction is not all at the CEO level. It's at the level of the people that are working in these specific sub areas. I wanted to mention somewhere, so maybe I'll toss it in right now if it's okay, that I had been involved in forming a financial consortium called National Affordable Housing Trust with some of these people that ultimately became SAHF members back in 1986, and we were in the U.S. the principal source of resources for building new affordable housing is a tax credit, and we had been a couple of members had begun to use the tax credit to raise capital. People will buy the credit, which reduces their own taxes, and they'll pay you, and you use that money to build the property. So we were paying 22% to the outside syndicators and capital raisers, and that was we thought that was ridiculous, because what they were really doing, I think back to your fundamental point in this chapter, what they were really doing was selling our competency to own and operate affordable housing, and we didn't need them to do that. So we formed a consortium of 5 nonprofits. It was originally 2. Again, the Coalition of the Willing expanding to a larger group, and so that developed as a successful financial intermediary with products focused on the needs of the affordable housing, nonprofit affordable housing community. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, I concluded and persuaded some of the leaders that we should merge the two organizations, that bringing additional transaction volume to the National Affordable Housing Trust would improve its profitability and, importantly, provide revenue or flexible funding to SAHF, the parent organization. So we about 3 years ago we combined the two, negotiated a business deal that everybody seemed happy with, and it looks as if this year our transaction volume should be about $200 million, up from about 100. So it was, again, the trust that was built in each of the organizations that enabled us to pull it together, and it's giving us it's policy. Back to your point, it's policy. It's program relevant. It's not sort of miscellaneous, buying and selling of widgets for a profit. And it's an area in which we have lots of policy proposals, and it's I think a very effective marriage.
These are marvelous illustrations of the breadth and scope of your vision, you and your colleagues' vision, Bill, and also of the application of that. I wonder if I can get you reflecting on what I suspect many of our listeners might be thinking, which is, oh my God, how do you do this and continue doing the work? You referred earlier to the fact that everyone is, in many ways, working off the side of their desk, and many people might be working for organizations that have very little extra money to invest in an initiative like this, let alone time. And so the phrase that you used was selling our competency or marketing our competency.
Yeah.
And I can relate to that. I think at Plan, a real epiphany for us was when we realized that our expertise was knowing what families were most concerned about when they thought about the future well-being of their sons and daughters with disabilities. And so we were able to take that to law firms, to insurance companies, and indeed to financial institutions, and not only improve their products and services for people with disabilities and their families, but also earn some revenue, for Plan. And so I just wonder if you have some suggestions about where to start for folks who are beginning this, who are captured by your vision, inspired by it, but maybe need one or two practical places to begin. What has been for you a long journey.
Right. I mean, one of the one of the places to begin, I think, that at least where I've begun a couple times and have seen others, is to focus the front end. I mean, I see a major role for philanthropy in the front end of putting together a lot of these ideas. That it's just not possible unless you're a wealthy individual to just launch something and get anywhere very fast if you don't have some external support. And we've had wonderful relations with the MacArthur Foundation and the Kresge Foundation and others, and a lot of that has been some walk-around money. So we were able to pull together the ideas, on somebody else's nickel, and not be trying to do everything through organic growth. So I think that's been an important piece of at least the kind of things I've been doing. As I look and I guess I should toss in there that pro bono legal services I think have been very helpful to us, but also to lots of others I've seen out there, where you have a ambitious, potentially complex vision, and have recognized that you need partners, and want to put together something at the beginning that is likely to stand the test of time, at least for a while. So I encourage people to, if they have, especially if they have something that has a financial element to it, to seek out pro bono counsel, early on, and get them involved in the planning and thought process, so that you develop an approach that avoids other obstacles you bump into later. And my favorite example of this is a group called Leapfrog Investments, which was started by Andy Cooper from Ashoka, which basically has developed insurance products for low-income people globally. They claim that 77% of the purchasers of their products are buying insurance for the first time, and the product is developed in connection with the communities that they're providing insurance to. They got pro bono help from a group called the International Senior Lawyers Project over a course of 2 or 3 years, and one of the Senior Lawyers Project's lawyers then served as voluntary general, or as unpaid general counsel to the group, and they've been enormously successful, partly because they were working in a complex market and they needed technical support, and they needed to do it right up front. So that's certainly a tool out there that everybody else should look at. Another observation I've had, and I've seen, and I've forgotten, one of the foundations published this idea at some point, but that the activities that social entrepreneurs engage in could be displayed on a horizontal graph, showing that some activities produce, in effect, 100% negative return. In effect, you have to have a grant in order to provide the service. Other activities can produce either returns of capital, or maybe even 5 or 6% positive return. And as one thinks through the use of the economic power, it's important, and gets invitations to 100 seminars on social impact bonds and social impact financing and so on. It's important to really think about where your work falls on that spectrum, because the types of products and partners are going to vary a lot depending on the answer to that question. So those are some of the thoughts, and it depends, of course, on the field and the person and the geography and so on. But there are plenty of people, plenty of financial institutions or financial intermediaries out there that are interested in just about any field, and so beginning to sort those out with a strong knowledge of your own base is the first step.
Thanks, Bill. And I know one of the individuals who has created that graph and writes very compellingly about it is Arthur Wood, who is based in Europe, but a former Ashoka colleague, of yours. And so, and we'll add, links to, for sure, everything that you're involved with, as well as Ashoka, and we'll add a link to some of Arthur's analysis as well. I wanted to just reflect for those listeners who are in Canada, but generally in North America. I think what you're essentially saying is that collaboration is enabled through mobilizing your economic power, and that for those of us who think about collective impact, and the sponsors of these webinars, Tamarack, of course, are leading proponents of collective impact, or to use my framing, to think and act like a movement. These kinds of collaborations are reinforced. There's some actually a mutual reinforcement when money is involved. And so the kind of walking around money that you talked about that was provided by foundations, sounds pretty essential to me, and maybe another argument that our listeners can use when they go to their funders. Now we're coming toward the end of our time here, and I wanted to ask you for some advice for the first timers. So for those who've never ventured into this territory but have heard about it, because of course the world is awash with talk about social finance, social innovation, social entrepreneurship, but who are inclined to dip their toe in. So these first timers, what's one piece of advice you would give them?
Well, I hate to say it depends, but I do think that the assembling of a team is really a critical first step, and that the team, whether it's staff or board or community or government folks, to focus on the purpose of the subject of today's session, ought to include some expertise on this topic, so that if you're not familiar with it to begin with, you don't spend your whole time buried in a morass of, as I say, of conferences with speakers talking about grand trends, but not able to kind of build the bridge between what you know and are trying to do on the one hand, and this world of social finance on the other. So I would, whether it's a lawyer, a banker, a foundation expert, somebody in the government who's working on social finance, but somebody that is tied into this world, so that you're not so you're investing your time and energies effectively, not just spending a lot of money on plane tickets and conferences. That I don't know if that responded to your question, Al, but it's
well, it's a helpful reminder to me as well that ultimately it's a way of thinking, and it's a way of being. It's not one component of your operation. It's infused throughout. It should ultimately become part of your DNA, so that not only folks who work, but your board members, staff at every level are engaged and understand that this is just not about money. It's this combination of your moral authority, your policy reach and effectiveness, your program delivery, holding true to your mission, and earning revenue. It's that kind of combination, and so as you begin, you're conscious of that. So it's not just hiring a director of social enterprise to go off on their own.
Right.
Yeah, so I like that a lot. And I've got two last questions. Second last one is for those who've been in the game for a while, how much bolder can we be with using the economic levers of society?
Well, I think as your question implies, we can be a lot bolder, and there's the nonprofit NGO world in particular, I think has a long history of people acting as a friend of mine used to say, like oysters polishing their pearls. That if everything is small and controlled, that feels good from a risk standpoint, but it really misses at least in a lot of cases, misses the opportunity to mobilize economic and political and other power, and they're just wonderful examples now globally of successes like plans, which I think, as your question implies, can itself go on to with its partners onto greater impact. And as we kind of go from a world where everything is divided into social sector, government and the business sector, into a world where these roles mix, and where the point is to get the job done, not to simply build your own organization. I think that we have tremendous opportunity.
Maybe just as a side question there, Bill, Ashoka has such a strong presence in Canada and in the United States and throughout the world. Do you want to do a quick, in quotation marks, commercial for Ashoka, but how people might use the Ashoka expertise as they begin or expand their initiatives in this regard?
Okay. Well, as again, as the question implied, Ashoka has about 3,000 fellows now in, it must be 80 countries around the world, elected from about 1981 to this year, and so it's a great laboratory for social innovation. I think its experience has migrated more towards the kind of cross-sectoral effort that I think Plan, among others, and Stewards of Affordable Housing represent, with players from all the sectors, and it is, we're increasingly agnostic about the form of organization. In some cases, and in some countries, it makes much more sense to organize as a for-profit business with built-in social goals than it does to form an NGO and be under the tighter finger of the government. So we've learned a lot, I think, over the decades about what social entrepreneurship is, what it takes to find a social entrepreneur or to make one. How important it is to have to work with youth to embed a mindset that everyone is a change maker, especially with youth. Not obviously with everybody, but mainly with youth. In terms of the economic and sort of financial side of being a social entrepreneur, Ashoka is beginning to do some really good work to try to pull together experiences and ideas. So there's a really good piece that Stuart Yasker at Ashoka has done lately called "Investing in Impact," and we can rather than my reading a long-winded link here, maybe we should just put it on the with the material, with the post-discussion materials.
Good. Yes, definitely.
But they've surveyed hundreds of fellows across the world, and developed some categories and some analytical approaches, and are working on taking the next step. So it's a better place to start than going to a social impact bond conference.
Bill Kelly, thank you. Thank you for emboldening Vicki and I that many years ago. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your friendship, and I'm sure thank you on behalf of our listeners for emboldening them. I look forward to our paths crossing very, very soon, hopefully with bicycles.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for including me in this and for reflecting what I've been trying to do in the book.
All the best.
Yep.
Christy, it's back to you.
Thank you so much again, Al and Bill, for sharing your insights and perspectives with us on the call today. And many thanks to all of you out there for joining us. Your comments and questions always help us to make this a dynamic and thought-provoking conversation. So please, let's continue this conversation through social media or email. A big thank you as well to our partners who have helped make this series possible: BC Partners for Social Impact, Planned Lifetime Advocacy Network, Social Innovation Generation, ABCD in Action, and Ashoka. Last but certainly not least, we would also like to thank our supporters: Human Resources and Social Development Canada, Maytree Foundation, J.W. McConnell Family Foundation, and the Province of Ontario for making these calls possible. As promised at the beginning of the call, in a few days we'll email you with the links to the audio and all of the other resources and material related to today's call that Bill mentioned, including a code for your free download copy of Al's book. We also welcome your feedback on these calls, so please do email Tamarack to let us know how we're doing. I encourage you to go online and register for the next Bookinar session on Tuesday, January 26th, 2016, from noon to 1 p.m. I will be joined by Jason Mogus, Principal Strategist at Communicopia, for the pattern Create a Container for Your Content. Our final part of this series will take place on Tuesday, February 2nd, from noon till 1 p.m. with Darcy Riddell, Director of Strategic Learning from the J.W. McConnell Family Foundation, for the pattern Who is as Important as How. Also a reminder that all of these sessions are being posted on our online library at www.deepeningcommunity.ca.